And we will make an FAQ for all of the questions that were asked, and we will post that to the BSCC's Officer Wellness website. So we will make sure that you get your questions answered. It just might not be today, but we hopefully will try to get through as many as possible. We just have a lot of information to get through today. So if we don't get to yours today, I promise we will get to them. Another thing also is that we do want to remind you that today's webinar is on the reporting requirements for the Officer Wellness Grant. If you have questions that are related to other aspects of the grant, such as implementation or acceptable use of funds, we ask you to send an email to the Officer Wellness inbox, and Eric has put that email address in the chat for you. And one of us will get back to you, either respond via email or reach out to you and have a conversation and answer that question. We want to be here to assist you in any way that we can in throughout this entire process of implementing your grant. If you have not already done so, we encourage you to check the BSCC's Officer Wellness webpage. We do use that as a way to communicate with all of you. So we update our FAQs every couple of months. Right now we are, that'll probably slow down in the future. So, go on there and check. We also will post information. So for example, like with this is a webinar today, we posted the Zoom information on there. So use that webpage as a way to, stay up to date with the grant. And Eric has also posted that in the chat. Now, these grant funds came last year as part of the 2022 budget, and all of you received a piece of those funds. And the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Trainings, or POST, also received some officer wellness funds, and they have an ongoing process for distributing those funds. And so with me today, before we start talking about the actual reporting requirements, we have Mike from POST, who's going to tell you a little bit about their program if you're interested, because you can sort of combine BSCC funds with POST funds for your officer wellness program. So Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, thanks for having me. I know you're going to cover a lot of grounds today during this webinar, but I will just throw in a little plug for what we have here at POST, and it's the POST Organizational and Resilience Program. It's been quite a bit of an undertaking.
Oh, you're on mute.
It must have automatically. Okay. So this program has been quite an undertaking, and I've had the opportunity to work with Stacy very closely on how we're going to really align our visions and the way this money is dispersed. So with the Post Organizational Wellness and Resilience Program, we received a much smaller amount than what the BSCC received and dispersed to the agencies. Our amount was $5 million, and that was only for program development, which is how we came to the POWER program. And a component of the POWER program is finding a way for sustainability. Now I see, Lieutenant Lauren Tucker online here, and that was my home base prior to. I was a lieutenant with the Alameda County Sheriff's Office, a part of our wellness team, our peer support team. And so I saw the benefits just as much as many of you have seen. I met with Dave from Laguna Beach last week. I see you're here as well. Thank you. But a component of the POWER program is the sustainability aspect. And whether it's personnel or funding, it's always one of the two that's really the stopgap. in furthering our movement towards continuing programs. We always have these great ideas, but then it comes to, okay, then what? And so that's where Stacy and I got a chance to work with each other because of this large sum of money the BSCC received. I worked with our partners who we went into contract with at UCSD because of their reporting capabilities. They're one of the top 15 researchers in the world. And I think it would be a missed opportunity if we didn't have some data to pull from at the end of our venture here. So what the Power Program is, a custom tailored program to your agency. So what it might look like at Fremont is going to look completely different at the sheriff's office versus Laguna Beach PD. So you have a bunch of different agencies, not only varying by region, but varying by responsibilities and budgets and staffing. And so, for example, this program could look like mindfulness sessions at your agency, whether it's 3 times a week, 4 times a week. It can be synchronous, asynchronous, in person, or online. Some of you are familiar with the Cortico app. And so this varies in that because this is actually a live person that you're going to be speaking with, whether it's, remotely or again, they're actually on base. Now, each offering, we just closed our first round and selected San Diego, Nevada County, and I can't remember the third. The second round is closing at the end of this month. So I would just encourage you to apply for this. And this costs your agency nothing. I'll ask my partner who's on here, Heidi, if you can just put in the link to our application, Heidi, that would be awesome. So for ease of access, it is a competitive based offering. So if you're familiar with the team building workshop, it's application based. I have a team that reviews it, so that way I'm out of that aspect because I meet with agency heads daily, and so it'd be very difficult for me to not have a bias on who to choose. The duration of this program will last until July 2025, and then in October we're going to furnish a report, and that's really the golden nugget. Is yes, we are going to help approximately 60 agencies in this competitive process. But what's really going to help agencies throughout the state is this report that shows what has worked, what works. And it's not just for people looking to bolster their existing wellness programs, but it's also geared to help people that may not have a wellness program, because many of you on this call here probably already have well-established wellness programs. But what I found here, my short time here at Post, is that there are agencies that don't have that. And a lot of it comes down to staffing and funding. And so I like I mentioned to Stacy early on, is I don't want this to be a missed opportunity for the agencies. I am here as a resource, as is Stacy and her team, to really help be the conduit for some long-lasting wellness, because with wellness, as you know, comes the recruiting, the retention, and everything that really can be a hindrance to our productivity or efficiency. So Heidi's going to put in the link to that application. There is a frequently updated FAQ section that I just plug in questions as they come in, and hoping they can help people to really see what this program looks like. It's hard to really just to summarize what it is at your specific agency, but there's anything on the table, from mindfulness sessions to yoga to Tai Chi, to many concepts that I think when I first started probably would have seemed foreign, and even may seem foreign now. But I'm really just trying to test the limits here and see and put it all out there, because what's going to work for El County may not work for Contra Costa County, and vice versa. So just really think about these BSCC funds as a metric to really help with the sustainability piece, if nothing else. If there's any questions, my contact info, Heidi's going to put that in the chat as well. Feel free to reach out to myself directly. There's also our email on the website that you can reach out to. It goes directly to my cell. So I want this to be successful, not for my benefit, but just for the agency's benefit, because I get nothing from this other than just knowing that the coppers out there are being taken care of. So thank you for having me, Stacy.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. Really appreciate it. And now the BSCC grant funds, the way the legislation was written up, it's limited to sworn staff, unfortunately. So there's a question in the chat there. Heather is wondering if the Power Program is also limited to sworn staff.
No, that is where that's the difference is that the Power Program, and this was kind of a push, but dispatchers, our RAs, our volunteer staff experience some level of trauma. As you know, as a member of the peer support team, we see that they also need some support. So no, the Power Program is not limited. It's whoever the agency has on their roster, that is who's eligible. And that's also addressed in the FAQs too. Great question, thank you.
Great, thank you, Mike. We really appreciate it. And Mike has been a fantastic resource for us here at the BSCC. And so we really appreciate are working with him over the past 6 months or so with our wellness program. And you know, we do know that there are a lot of you out there that don't have any type of officer wellness program, and you know, this will be your first opportunity to have a program. And so if you've got these funds and you don't know where to start, go to Post's website, and even if you don't apply to their Power Program, they have a lot of resources on their webpage, and that may help give you some ideas. We also have several resources listed on our BSCC webpage that you can go to for related to officer wellness. And so we encourage you to, if you don't know what you're going to do with these funds, haven't quite figured it out, you know, do that research and reach out to us, reach out to Mike, and you know, we're happy to help you in any way that we can. Particularly, you know, the goal really, like Mike said, is that at the end, we would really love to see at the end of these 3 years that you're able to take this starting point, for especially for those of you that have very little or no wellness programming, and turn it into something that you can continue long-term beyond the use of these funds. And so that's something that we also want you to be thinking about when you're using these funds is this something that we can continue on down the road? Okay, so jumping back to our purpose today of the reporting requirements, there are 2 different reports that you will complete for this grant. There are the annual reports, and those are just a brief high-level reporting each year that you'll submit by December 1st about sort of what you're doing, how you're doing on spending the funds. We want to see you spend these funds. We don't want you to have to return any funds when this is done and over with. And so we like to make sure that you're on track with spending these funds. And so we just, each year we want to, you know, get an idea as to what you're doing with the funds and how you're doing on spending those down. And so we'll talk more detail about that later. Those 2 are due. One is due December 1st, 2023. Second one is due December 1st, 2024. And then the grant ends December 1st, 2025. And that is also the due date for the final impact and expenditure report. And that report, I'm going to start talking about that one first, and then we'll come back to the annual reports. As I was putting this together, I realized that 2 hours may not have been enough time to get through everything that we need to get through. Like I said, we have a lot to get through. So I want to start with the final impact and expenditure report. We'll talk about that. If we need to have another webinar for the annual report, we can do that. That's fine. I do want to make sure that we get through the final impact report today, definitely. Again, those deadlines are the annual report. They're always due on December 1st. So annual report, first one, December 1st, 2023, 2024. And then the final impact and expenditure report is December 1st, 2025. Now I'm going to share my screen here. Now, hopefully all of you have seen this before and recognize it, but if not, this is our wellness and mental health page. As I said, this is what we will use to communicate with you and update you with information. So we have FAQs that actually will be updated again, probably this week or early next week. Those will be updated. So you'll have that. We'll also be doing FAQs related to today's webinar, which will be posted on here. Funding allocation disbursements, and then down here is the reporting requirements. And we've got all this information for the webinar that we're on now. There is a data reporting guide that is available for you. It's a PDF. You can download it. It provides detailed step-by-steps for completing the reports. If you downloaded it previously, please download it again. I just updated it yesterday. There were some changes that I made in the expenditure report section. That's the only part that changed. But make sure that you have the most recent version, which is the April 2023. It'll say April 2023 on the front. And Eric also put in the chat the link, direct link to the data reporting guide. So, have that, use that as a resource when you're completing these reports. Direct link is for the February 2023. Oh, interesting. Okay, Elisa, I'll have to check on that. If nothing else, I will email you all out the April one. It was supposed to be updated yesterday. Maybe they didn't get to it. So, okay, so we will, as I said, we're going to start talking about the final impact and expenditure report. The form that you will be submitting is on this website. So you can go to that form anytime. Please don't submit until you're actually ready to. But this form is available, so you can go and you can play around with it and see what the questions are, look at it relative to the data reporting guide at any time possible. So you can look at that at any time. There are two parts to the final impact and expenditure report. There is the form, which we're going to go over, and then the other part is an Excel file, which is where you report your expenditures. We will be sending each of you a customized expenditure report Excel file. We will email that out to the contact person that we have listed on file. And it'll be customized, so it'll have your agency information in it. It will have the amount that your grant was, but until we get that down, get that customized version to you, here it's kind of hard to, it gets kind of buried here, but there is a sample template Excel file that you can download and use use until we get that customized one to you. So this is what the form looks like, and now I want you to kind of, when you think doing this, think about the fact that you're going, oh yeah, I got to fill out this form. I know we all kind of feel that way at times, but Mike talked about collecting data through both of these programs and being able to demonstrate how important these programs are in terms of officer wellness. And so we really want you to take the time to really think about how you're going to share with us, with everyone, the impact that these funds had, that whatever program you decide to implement. And when I say program, I'm using that term very broadly, and that the program may be a typical standardized program. Program may also be you purchased fitness equipment. Okay, so I'm using the term very broadly when I say program, so keep that in mind, because I will use that term throughout today's webinar. But we want you to really think about how you're going to demonstrate the impact that these funds had. Think about this. Post may share these afterwards. That when this is over, we give all this information to Post. They may decide that they want to share these reports that you guys created with others. And think about where you're at right now. If you've had access to a report that's doing exactly what you're doing, and you basically had a template as to how to go about measuring and implementing your program, wouldn't that be fantastic? So think about that. Think about the fact that these findings can be used to demonstrate to state legislators how important officer wellness is and how much these funds are needed, and try to get those legislators to provide more funds for officer wellness. Also, you can use these findings from your own project to apply for additional grant funds. You can demonstrate, look, this is what we did before, this is what we found. Use that as an example to demonstrate your capabilities of implementing and measuring outcomes for a wellness program. So keep those in mind when you're developing your plan for your wellness program. So this final impact report is really just that. We want to not only learn about how you use the grant funds, but also we want to know the measurable, demonstrable impact these funds had on the well-being of your officers. Now, although this report isn't due until the end of the grant, you really need to start thinking about this now. And as we go through this, you will understand better as to what things you want to be thinking about now. So this is the reason I wanted to start with the final impact report, is so you can be thinking about this early on. So as I mentioned already, the final impact report has two separate components. One is this online form here, and the other is the Excel form, which you will attach, or the Excel sheet, which you will attach to this, which is your expenditure report. Now, one of the things that you need to think of when you're completing this is that this form must be completed in one sitting. You cannot start working on this, save it, and come back to it later. So what we encourage you to do is put your responses in an Excel, or sorry, well, it could be an Excel file or a Word document. Save that, work on it in that Word document, and then once you've answered all of the questions, then go and cut and paste it into this form, because you can't save it. Also, because you'll be attaching the Excel file, again, make sure you have the Excel file completed before you complete this form. Okay, I'm just going to stop there before we're going to jump into the details of each field within the form and the expenditure report, but I want to stop there for a minute. I'm seeing things going through the chat, Eric. Do we have some questions, general questions about what I covered so far in the chat?
Yeah, so one question that we got is, should we need additional time to complete the program past 12/1/2025, and can a no-cost time extension be requested?
Um, Ideally, we need them by 12/1/2025, so you want to kind of be preparing in advance. We do realize that things come up where we all live in the real world, things happen. If it comes that you need an extension, then that would be a situation where you would reach out to us, and we can discuss that. But really want to be planning in advance and get everything done by December 1st.
And then one more question, are we going to submit the Excel with each annual report or just with the 12/1/2025 final report?
Excellent question. No, we will. The Excel file is only submitted with the final impact report. The annual report does have a couple fields where we do ask like how much money you've spent this year or how much you've spent to date, but we don't ask for detailed breakdown of how you spent those funds specifically until the end with the final impact report.
And one last question, if we use the entire balance of the funds in year one, will we need to submit additional reports in the year two and at the end?
Yes, you will. And the reason for that is that if you use all the funds in year one, you should still be tracking like how it's being used. So for example, if you purchase fitness equipment and you spend all your money in year one, you still want to be tracking how that's being used for the duration of the grant. And that final impact report asks for a lot more detailed information than the annual report. Okay. If we have other questions, we will continue to go back to those and try to answer those. As I said, we want to get through all of them, but we also want to get through as much information as possible. So we're going to start just by going through each of the sections for the final impact report. There are 5 sections to this. The first section is just basic information, law enforcement agency, who prepares it, the person's title, and a phone number and email address, so we can reach out to you if we have any questions. Please make sure with the law enforcement agency that you write it out. If you put BPD, that could be Berkeley Police Department or it could be Bakersfield Police Department. And probably the Bakersfield Police Department and the Berkeley Police Department, the officers have very different experiences. So we want to make sure that we got the right agency. So make sure you write that out. The only other question in section 1 is your program focus. So we've broken down the program focus into 3 broad categories: physical health, mental and or emotional health, or other. And so you can select one, you can select all. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind is that for each of these program focus areas that you select, you will need to complete a separate section 2 through 4. So if I select mental health, you have a section 2, section 3, and section 4 that you'll need to complete. If I have mental health and physical health, you'll need to complete a section 2 for physical health, 3, and 4. And then you'll need to do that again for any programs related to mental and emotional health, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So keep that in mind when you're planning your report. And one of the things that you'll see is that once you know what you're going to do with your funds, you've figured out how you're going to implement it, you can actually write out half of your responses now, once you've got that information figured out. So you could do half of your report now, put it in that Word document, set it aside until it gets closer to the end of 2025 and pull it back out and finish it, and it's half done. So that's always an option as well. Okay, section 2 is where you're going to describe your program. So in this is where we want a detailed description of how the funds were used. So how was it designed to improve officer wellness? How was the program implemented? Mike mentioned the Cortico app. Maybe you decide you're going to use your funds for that. Well, how did you implement it? Did you just tell the officers to go and download the app and that was it? Or did you provide some type of training, some type of instructions? Were there announcements in meetings about the Cortico app? How did you implement that program? Think of this for this description here. If somebody wanted to do what you've done, they should be able to read this section and go, oh, okay, I know how they did it. Okay. So you think of it in that way. Again, it doesn't need to be overly detailed. So you can say, announcements were made at meetings about this. You don't need to say, at 6 meetings on these dates, these announcements were made. This was a specific announcement. We don't need that level of detail. But you do want to provide sufficient details so that somebody reading this would understand how you implemented that program. We want you to identify at least one specific goal that you plan to achieve with the use of these funds. And this is something that you want to identify before you implement the program. And the goal should be something that is demonstrable. You want to be able to demonstrate in your final impact report the extent to which the goal was achieved. So, for example, if you implemented a peer support program, your goal may be to reduce stress levels in officers. You can demonstrate changes in stress level in your officers, and that's a fairly easy thing to do. You could, if you wanted, you could get real fancy and do things like measure cortisol levels in the bloodstream. You don't have to do that, but you could. But there's a lot of different ways that you can measure stress. I pulled this out the internet. This is a standardized stress scale. Eric is going to put a link to this in the chat, just in case you are looking at lowering stress in your officers. This is a standardized scale. It's been validated. So it has some standard scores based on gender, age, and race. And it's very easy to implement. 10 questions. You give it out to the officers. They answer the 10 questions on this 0 to 4 scale. Lower ratings, lower stress level. Not very difficult. So something like that is easy to use and to implement, and easy way to demonstrate change in stress levels. So you could do something as simple as that, or as I said, you want to be really advanced and elaborate, you could go on and look at like cortisol levels in the bloodstream, but I don't know that we want to go down that road, but maybe you do. Yes, and I just saw pop through in the chat the link to the stress measure. I just popped it in there. Oh, and Eric did too, so it's in there twice. So yeah, if you want to use that, as I said, it's been validated. It's simple, 10 questions. Takes maybe 5 minutes to fill it out. Okay, Eric, so I'm going to stop there. Do we have any questions related to section 2?
Yes, got one question here. Are there any limitations on the number of characters allowed in the final impact reporting fields?
There is, but I don't remember what it is, but it's something like 20,000. It's really huge. I don't think you'll run into that as an issue. If you did, if for some reason you did, you could just put a little note, see attached, and you could finish it on a Word document and attach it at the end where you also attach your Excel expenditure report. So, good question.
And we do have other questions, but in terms of time, I'm going to skip over. And just to remind everybody that if you did ask a question, we are recording them and we will get back to you with them.
Great, thank you, Eric. Okay, so I started kind of introducing this idea of these wellness measures already with this idea of this brief 10-question self-report way to measure stress. We have put on here several different options for you to use. You don't have to use these. A lot of these are ones that your agency is probably already collecting. So we have these on here. If you, as I said, if you want to use them, if it's appropriate for your program, then you definitely can, but you don't feel like you have to. If you don't use any of those, you select the other, and just there's a box that pops up that asks you to describe what that measure happens to be. Now, again, you want to be thinking about what is my measure going to be? It should be something that you would expect to change as a result of the implementation of this program. And you want it to be something that is easy enough for you to access, obviously. I kind of mentioned the cortisol levels, but probably not many agencies are going to go out and have, officers give a blood sample so they can collect this, but you could if you wanted to. So think about, what do you have access to, what is reasonable, and what would we expect to see change based on what we are doing with these funds. Now, it's best practice to have multiple measures for each goal. So even though you only have to have one, ideally it's good to select a couple, because what may happen is if you only select one, it may not be sensitive enough to detect the difference, and you may end up concluding, oh, this program didn't help at all, but in fact it did. But it's just that was not sensitive enough to pick up on that. So let's go back to the example of this peer support group, say, or peer support program that we're implementing. Say we decided we wanted to look at a couple different things. We know stress is related to our immune system and weakening of the immune system. So they say, well, we'll look at the number of sick days used, because that could be related to stress. And then we've also got that simple 10-question scale that we're going to do. That's fairly easy, won't take a lot of time. We can do that. And then say, for example, also, you noticed in exit interviews that there were several people reporting that one of the reasons that they were leaving was because of their stress levels were too high. So you could use the exit interviews. So all of these are related to stress. There's good reason to believe that they would change as a result of a peer support program, but they're also all very distinct. So maybe at the end, you find out that the number of sick days didn't change, but in their self-reported measure of stress was lower. And their exit interviews, fewer people reported leaving due to stress. So if you'd only looked at sick days, you'd end up concluding, well, this program didn't work. And the reality was that because you looked at these others also, you found out that it did work. It's just that this measure here didn't pick it up. So good to have more than one measure whenever possible, because you may not pick it up just with that one measure. Now, as I clicked on these, you may have noticed these popping up here. It's pre-post assessment control group. Well, what is that? So I'm gonna, if you're familiar with pre-post assessments and control groups, in terms of assessing change, measuring change, bear with me. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with understanding what those terms mean and how they can be used. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what is a pre-post assessment and what is a control group when we're talking about assessing change or measuring change. So pre-post assessment and control groups are just two ways that you can measure change. So pre-post assessment is basically just a fancy way of saying you look at the measures before you implement the program and after you implement the program and look to see if there are differences. A control group approach is where you have those individuals that participated in the program and another group, your control group, are those that did not participate in the program. And you compare results for those two groups. So there's two different ways to do that. And I don't know, I'm a visual learner, so that for me, I like to see things as opposed to just hearing them. So put this out. This is an example of what a pre-post assessment would look like. We're going to just use the example of this stress survey. So you've got your program set up. You're going to start a peer support program. It's going to start in July, and before you started on July 1st, you administer the 10-question survey to those that are going to take part in the peer support program. So you've got John, Judy, Martha, Michael, and Sam are going to participate. You administer the survey, you implement the program, and John, Judy, Martha, Michael, and Sam all participate. And then in October, you administer the survey again to the same people that you did at the beginning. Now, this is an ideal situation. Now, we know that the reality is usually not like this at all. So the reality is probably something more like, well, this is how it starts out. But then, let's see here, we want to on this. Oops, John retires. I don't want that. Wrong button. There we go. John retires. Judy leaves. And then you have other people. So let's see, we're going to have Heather decides she wants to join along with Tanya. Oops. And Mike. They all decide that they want to join also. And then at the end here, you no longer have John and Judy's data, but then you've got this here where you've got these three people. You didn't collect their data at the beginning, but now they're here at the end. And it's a lot messier than that in the real world. In 2 years' time, a lot happens, a lot can change. We realize that. So it's not ideal. Now, a control group, this is the same basic setup, except for when you start the program, you don't do anything. You don't do any measures. You implement this program with John, Judy, Michael, Martha, and Sam. And we know that John and Judy leave. So we're not able to measure them later. But those others that joined, we can measure them. But then you have these people here, Howard, Marilyn, Scott, Julie, and Matt. They didn't participate. They're going to be your control group. So you have then, you look at the stress levels at the end for these people that participated and these people that did not participate. Now, what should happen is that these individuals should have lower stress, self-reported stress levels than these individuals if your program was effective. Now, we all have met those people that stress out over every little thing, and it's through the roof. And we've also met those people that they can have the world coming down on them and they seem not to be bothered by anything. Most of us fall in between those two extremes. So it may be that Howard, Marilyn, Scott, Julie, and Matt are all like the chillest people in the world. And no matter what you do, you're never going to get your stress level, the stress levels of Michael, Martha, and Sam to the level of these individuals, just because they're so chill. That's one of the problems with the control group that you don't have with this, because it's the same individuals here. Their stress levels are going to be, their average stress, how they deal with stress is going to be the same, as opposed to different groups of individuals. So depending on whether you want to do the pre-post assessment or the control group, it really kind of is something you'll need to decide depending on what your measures are, and what's what issues do you need to concern yourself with. So if you're going to do a pre-post assessment, you don't have to worry about individual differences, excuse me, and variations and just different personalities. You don't have to worry about that. But you do have to deal with all the weird things that happen in between here. Another issue with the pre-post assessment is that you could have something happen here. Say, for example, you had an officer-involved shooting right before you went to administer this post-stress survey. That could be a problem, because stress levels, officer-involved shooting, obviously the stress levels of all officers is going to increase. This, if that's the case, you don't have to worry about it, because both your control group and your and your group that's participating in the peer support program will both be exposed to it. But this one, you have to worry about those individual differences. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about deciding to use a control group or using a pre-post assessment. But what these approaches do is they allow you to demonstrate that that impact was there, regardless as to which you use. So if you use the control group and you find that the stress levels were lower for these individuals than these individuals who did not participate, then you'll be able to show that impact of the program. Likewise here, if you're able to demonstrate that stress levels for these individuals was lower here than it was at the beginning, you're able to demonstrate then the impact of those funds. Now, obviously, if you're wanting to do this, but you've already started the program, it kind of makes this part difficult if you've already started implementing the program, and it may force you to do a control group approach. Now, as you can see for these, it doesn't have to be one for all of them. You may decide that, for example, excuse me, for your sick days used, we're going to do a pre-post assessment. So we're going to look at just the year before we implemented the program and the number of sick days used before and the number of sick days used 1 year, the last year of the program. So you want to have the same amount of time, so 1 year. The self-report measure, we're going to do the pre-post too. Pre-post really a lot of times is just easier, but it does come with its issues. And then for the exit interviews, we're going to do a control group. So for what we're going to do is in October, we're going to look at exit interviews for the people that were in the program and left, and the exit interviews for the people that were not in the program or did not participate in the program and left, and look at how many reported stress as being a reason for leaving. So you can intermix these two types within your program. Hopefully I'm not making this overly complicated. We'll do questions here in just a couple of minutes. What you want to do here is if you're doing a pre-post assessment, indicate the time periods being compared. So are we going to do 1 year before and 1 year and the 1 year during, for example, with the sick days used? You may decide you want to do it for the self-report measure. Maybe you're going to do it at the beginning, 1 year in, and at 2 years. You can do that. You don't have to just do 2. You can do more than 2. So if for any measure you're doing a pre-post assessment, include the duration or the time periods. If you're doing a control group, you want to talk about the characteristics of the control group. So I mentioned that there's going to be individual differences that are at play in your control group. So if we go back here to these groups, for looking at stress, there may be some things that you can address with your groups to help minimize that. So for example, if you have a rookie that is right out of the academy, his stress levels are probably going to be higher just because he's new. I mean, any job you take, when you first start a job, there's added stress. You want to, you're learning a lot of information. You want to make a good impression. You don't want to make mistakes. So that is just amplified when you're in the position of a police officer, because of the additional responsibilities that is put upon you. So a rookie is probably going to have higher levels of stress than somebody that's been in the job for, say, 10 years. So those are some things that you can kind of control for. So if somebody in your program is in the first couple years on the force, then you may want to find somebody that's going to be part of the control group that's fairly new to the force as well. So there's things you can do to try to control for that. We know there's gender differences in how stress is handled. So in my example here, we had 2 females and 3 males in each of the groups. So there's things you can do to try to minimize some of those individual differences. So you'll want to talk about that here if you use a control group. If you're doing all pre-post assessments, just put NA here, because as you can see, it'll say this field is required if you try and leave it blank. Same with this here. If you're doing control group, then you can just put NA up here. And then finally, you want to describe how you expect these measures to change. You're expecting that the self-reported stress levels will be lower at the end after being in the program relative to before. You're expecting that the number of sick days in the last year of the program will be lower than the year before you implemented the program. So this doesn't have to be extremely lengthy. You have a lot of space here, but you could just do 1 or 2 sentences for each of the measures that you're going to use. Okay, so I want to stop there. Have I totally and completely confused everybody? Hopefully I haven't, but do we have any questions related to pre-post assessments and control groups, Eric?
Yeah, so I got one question here. With all the turnover among our agencies, how do you address changes, particularly related with stress, as the team makeup changes?
So again, there's, we recognize that in the real world, it's not a nice, clean, beginning and end. And you'll have a lot of changes going on, staff coming, leaving. If you get a new chief of police in, that'll add stress and change. If you have, a major event in your city, maybe there's, there's a mass shooting in your city. These are all things that you cannot control. There's nothing you can really do about it other than just acknowledge that it existed, that it happened. And there is a place down here later on where you can talk about those. And that's all you can do. So you can talk about, why progress was or wasn't made on those goals. Well, we had a lot of turnover. We had a new chief of police. There was a mass shooting in our city. Whatever the case may be, you have opportunities in here to talk about those impacts and, tie that back to, whether you found a difference or not. So it may be, for example, that you find stress levels are still high at the end, And they're just as high at the end that they were at the beginning. But you go, yeah, they were just as high, but we had a new police chief, we had a mass shooting in our city, and they didn't get worse. You would expect that they're going to get worse with all of this stuff. So the peer support group helped keep it level. I mean, it didn't necessarily get it better, but it kept it from getting worse. So you do have opportunities to talk about those, because we realize, the real world, it's not nice and neat and clean. Other questions, Eric?
Yeah, I got one more here. When using sick leave usage as a measurable factor, how do you accommodate for days taken for COVID leave?
Again, it's something that you would just want to address in here and talk about later on when you're talking about the findings. You may mention that you have a COVID, you had a COVID outbreak, or if you have other records documented in your file, or the HR department has that in their file, saying that there was a large COVID outbreak and that there was a lot of officers. Maybe what you do is there was a month where like you were barely keeping everybody, enough officers to function because there were so many people out with COVID. It just ran rampant through the whole department. Maybe what you do is you pull out that 1 month. Okay, if you had a huge outbreak, and then pull out that 1 month again at the end, just to keep those dates comparable. So there are ways you can address that. If it's just more of the continual ongoing of COVID people being out, and it isn't a really nice clean outbreak, but it's not lumped together of an outbreak, and you can't really pull that time period out, then you just sort of have to talk about that. That's kind of our reality now, is that COVID happens, and people are going to miss work because of it. Other questions, Eric?
As of right now, we're getting a lot of questions about specific expenditures. For those, you can send them to our Officer Wellness Grant email. I will post that email again in the chat. For specific expenditures, please send your questions over there.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Yeah, send those to the if you're asking about allowable expenses, or using the funds, please send those to the email inbox, and one of us will get back to you with those questions. We do want to keep it the questions specific to the content of the reporting requirements. And Eric has put that email address in the chat again. Okay, so we have no more questions about the pre and post assessment versus control group. We'll go ahead and continue on. Again, it may be that when you go, okay, yeah, I got it. And then you go and sit down to kind of really start thinking about it and work out your plan, and you realize, oh, I don't got it. Send us an email. I'm happy to kind of sit down with you and help you work through any of this, and reviewing kind of what you have planned to make sure that you're on the right track. I'm happy to help you out, and just send an email, and I can either email you back, or we can set up a time to talk about your measures and how you want to implement those. So please feel free that if you later on you don't understand something, that you don't feel like you're out of luck, we're definitely still here to help you throughout this entire grant process. Section 4 is the program impact. And so in that section, this is where you basically are going to show the impact of these results. So the first thing we want is the number of officers that benefited from your program. And so this needs to be what we call an unduplicated count. And by that, we want the number of individuals that this benefited. So if you have say you purchase gym equipment and you now have a gym that everybody has access to that can use, if you have one officer that goes one time and one officer that goes every single day, they count the same. Okay, so we're not looking at like the number of times they used it, but just how many individuals used it. So, and if, say, for example, if it's a gym, maybe they have to swipe their card to access the gym. You could, look at, get a list of everybody that swiped their card to get into the gym. If it, ideally, if it's something like a gym, maybe you could have a sign-in sheet, or when people go to use it, you could keep track that way. So there's different ways that you can keep track of it. So you want to include the total number of officers that benefited from it. This next box is where you're going to report your results, whether it's the pre-post assessment or the control group. You'll put that here, and it doesn't have to be anything lengthy. It doesn't have to be, doesn't have to be complete sentences. So you could say for number of sick days, 1 year prior, we had 572 sick days used, and then last year program we had 550 sick days used. And then you just do that again. So like I said, it doesn't have to be complete sentences. Just put in your data there, whatever that data happens to be. Yeah. The next thing you want to do is then describe that. Now is where you kind of write it out. So in this case, you would, you may say that, for the number of sick days, fewer sick days were used in the last year of the program when compared to the year before we implemented the program. Okay, so just describing it. And also apply it to those goals. To go back to those goals and say, yes, this did, demonstrate that we made progress on our goals, that we, the self-reported stress levels were lower after they participated in this program. So we were successful in our goal to reduce levels of stress. So again, it doesn't have to be extensive, a couple sentences for each of the measures that you used. And then here is where you can talk about possible explanations as to why the progress either was made or wasn't made towards your goal. You can say, well, progress wasn't made towards our goal to reducing stress because in the middle of this we had a mass shooting event, or we had an officer involved shooting, which put all of the officers' stress level is much higher. But because at the end the levels were the same, we were going to say that it actually helped and that their stress levels didn't increase in spite of that. or whatever the case may be. Okay. And then here you can describe any other impacts beyond the measures that were observed. And it could be something that is formal or informal. So you could say, well, we didn't find any difference in any of our measures of stress, but when we decided to talk to the individuals that participated in the program, and we received a lot of positive feedback and heard comments such as, the peer support program really helped me when I was going through, dealing with the death of a family member. And so I found it to be really beneficial, blah, 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 blah. So even if your measures don't show it, you may decide, okay, well, let's just go talk to the people, see what they say. Or you may say, well, although it didn't address their stress levels, we did find other benefits in that, there seemed to be an increased camaraderie among the officers that were participating in this program, and we saw more of those officers spending time together outside of the work environment, whatever the case may be. And you want to look at both the positive and the negative impacts. Again, remember I said that, if you had this completed that somebody else has already done, it's going to make your life much easier if you could just read this and see what was done. Well, you want to know the good and the bad. So, talk about any negative impacts that may have occurred as well. And that may be that, the implementation took a lot longer than we expected, and it took a lot more man hours to get everything up and running, which meant we had to, those officers that were focused on this were, they weren't able to do other aspects of their job. So other people had to, cover what they weren't doing at that time. So talk about both the good and the bad. They aren't things that are necessarily measured, but talk about that aspect, because if you were reading this, you would want to know the good and the bad as well. Okay, Eric, do you have any questions on section 4?
This covers a little bit more overall, but
Okay.
seem important. How do we account document for months missed for 2023 if we don't implement a program till mid to late 2023?
There's not a set, like you must start by a certain date. I just, like with this here, I just picked July 2023. We realized that things take, depending on what you're doing, it can take a while to get your program up and running. And so when you get to doing the annual report for the first year, we recognize that probably a lot of this first year is going to be more focused on the implementation aspect. And so you'll be talking more about that. Either you may have spent all of your funds with the implementation, or you may not have spent any at this point because you're still planning. So it's just something that, the BSCC deals with, dozens of grants, and we realize that implementation takes time. So there's not a set date that you must start by. We just want to see that you're continually making progress throughout.
And as kind of a supplement to that, what if our agency doesn't use the money this year? Do we submit an NA and the fields come for the end of this year report?
Yeah, and when we get to the annual reports, we'll talk more about that. But yeah, if you don't spend any of the funds, you'll just put a 0 in how much, and when it asks how much funds you spent this year. And and that's okay. There's no expectation that you spend the same amount evenly across all of the years. We know it's going to fluctuate. And so again, it's really just with all of these, with the annual reports in particularly, we want to see that you're making progress. Other questions?
I don't have anything else specific to the measures, so we'll move on. And again, all questions will eventually be answered by us.
Yes, yeah, we will answer any questions that we don't get to today. Okay, so how are you all doing? Are you hanging in there? Are you feeling overload? Okay, I'm going to ask you all to do something, and bear with me. I'm going to do it too. Okay, everybody stand up. I know you're going, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. Play along, just stand up. Stand up, everybody stand up. Okay, some of you aren't going to do it. Okay, those of you are, even if you're not. Put your right hand out in front of you, palm up. Put your left hand up. Can't see it, but I've got 2 fingers up. So your fingers look like this. Put them up. Bring that left hand down. Put those 2 fingers on your wrist. Everybody still have a pulse. We're still alive. I haven't killed you with boredom yet. No, fantastic. Okay, take a minute, stretch your legs now that you're standing. Get that blood circulating. I know this is a lot of information. I know it's a long 2 hours, and it's not the most exciting information. I realize that. So I do appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. If you need to take a 5-minute break or whatever, please feel free to do so. We just want to, like I said, I want to get through as much of this as possible. And I know it's a lot of info. So if you missed some of it, or if you didn't capture all of it today, it's okay. We're still here. We'll be able to help you out down the road. Okay, so let's get back to section 5. We're getting close. We're at section 5 now out of 6. Section 5 is the overall implementation experience. So this isn't specific to the measures or your program, your specific program, but just kind of the overall experience with implementing this grant. So did your agency spend all of the grant funds? Yes or no? We really hope that all of you say yes. We want those funds to be put to good use. We really don't want to have to give them back to the state. We want to see them being put to good use. If you do click no, if you don't spend all of your funds, we'll just ask you to briefly describe what challenges you encountered that kept you from spending down all of your funds. Did you have enough funds to implement the program you wish you could have? Now, be realistic here. We always, everybody could use more funds, and you can always think of more to do with it. But what we're talking about is, okay, this is the plan. This is what we're going to implement. And then did you have enough? One of the things that we've seen frequently with some of our other grantees that receive funds is the last couple of years, there have been issues with inflation. Inflation levels that they didn't take into account because they didn't expect them to be that high. So they had to make adjustments. Well, maybe that's the case here, is that if inflation continues to escalate at high levels, maybe you didn't plan for that and you ended up not having enough funds, or maybe something ended up costing more than you expected it to. I know that Tanya is talking with some agencies that are looking into getting a office therapy dog. Well, you're going to use the funds for that. Well, maybe your office therapy dog, broke its leg and had to get X-rays and a cast and a lot of vet expenses that were planned for. So, would have led to not having enough funds. So talk about that briefly. And then talk about any challenges that you encountered while implementing the grant and how you were able to overcome those challenges. And, we go back to the peer support program. Maybe early on there wasn't a lot of interest in the peer support program, and you weren't really, officers weren't really buying into it. And so you could talk about that and say, hey, well, what we realized was that we really needed somebody that had the right personality to be out there selling selling, so to speak, this program. Somebody that's very charismatic, that's approachable, somebody that's respected by their peers. And once we got that right person in the position, then there was a lot more buy-in. So you could talk about that as an example. What other challenges that you encounter, because inevitably you will encounter challenges, and you'll need to figure out how to overcome those. Provide any recommendations or lesson learned. What do you wish you knew at the beginning that you know now at the end? What would you want to tell somebody else who would be interested in implementing this type of program? Excuse me. These allergies, the beautiful flowers are just killing me this time of year. And then the very beginning, Mike Post and myself both talked about sort of this sustainability piece. And so now the last question here is, describe your plans to continue to optimize the physical, emotional, and mental health of officers. So how do you plan on sustaining officer wellness? And maybe it's not with this program that you implemented with these funds, but how are you going to try to do that? And also, does it include working with Post? I mentioned that Post has a lot of resources available, even if it's not part of their Power program. And so you can use some of the resources that Post has available. Okay, so any questions on this last section here?
We got one here. I understand the final report is due 12/1/2025, but does the grant performance period end in July 2025 or 12/1/2025?
So it's going to be up to you as to when you decide to end it. Technically, the grant ends December 1st. You have to have all your grant funds spent by that date. Excuse me. And you can spend up until December 1st, 2025. So you have up until that date. Now, while you're doing this impact report, obviously you want to have some of those, some of that information, before that. So you may decide that you want to end it in July or August or September, or whatever works best for yours, because we've got 394 grantees that receive this funding, and there are 394 different ways that it's going to be spent. And so that's something that we're going to leave it up to your agency to decide when you're going to do that cutoff for tracking your data. Excuse me. Other questions?
As each agency will create program demands from this grant allocations and our reporting, are we doing this work to get sustained state funding beyond 2025 without reporting requirements?
Let me reread that.
So it sounds like they're asking if they will continue past 2025.
There's not a requirement that you must continue beyond 2025. Ideally that with these funds, especially for those agencies that don't have any type of wellness, that you're able to start, these funds will help you to start focusing on officer wellness and help you to develop ideas for other ways that you may be able to focus on officer wellness without these funds available. But there's no requirement to do so. But we do, that's something that we do want to see is you being able to sustain officer wellness beyond this, but it's not a requirement.
And this is more of a general question, but I'm seeing it come up a couple times in chat here. So regarding supplanting, if people have a program that is budgeted last year but not budgeted this year, can they use funds for the grant for the program this year?
Tanya, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. So I would say that it depends. If the agency has an intent to continue, it was as a budget line item last year, and let's say they wanted to continue the program this year, they didn't put it in as a line item, but they're paying for it in a different way from some kind of salary savings or some other type of savings, then that would still concern us about supplanting. If the program was in operation and there was absolutely no way that the agency was going to continue that for budgetary reasons, and it was going to come to a conclusion, then that might be acceptable and not be considered supplanting. But I would make sure that you have very clear justification and backup or proof that it wasn't going to be funded in some other way, despite being in a budget line item.
Great, thank you, Tanya.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the final section of the final impact report is the expenditure report. That's your section 6 here. And as you can see, this is where you will just drag and drop, or it allows you to browse and see pictures of my foster puppies that popped up. And that this attachment, this expenditure report, as I said, we will send out a customized one to each of you. But until then, there is that blank template that is available on our website, and this is that blank template. And there are 2 tabs here. And the first tab here is the advanced payment tab. And this is just a summary page. And when you get that customized sheet, you'll want to look over the summary page. Make sure the information here is correct, that we've got the correct grantee, your address, and that we'll put in the grant award amount, the amount that you were supposed to receive. There will be here under advanced total, how much the check was that you received. These should be the same. And then your grant award balance, it should be this, you should see a dash here indicating that you have no balance left because we gave you all of those funds in advance. So just when you receive this customized form, check this, make sure it's all accurate. Invoice 1, this is what you will be filling out. And everything that you need to fill out are these fields here that are highlighted in green. Now, the purpose of this report is to provide you with the detailed information about how these funds were used. For all of the fields where you are reporting the dollar amount, you'll round to the nearest whole dollar. So do not include any decimal points. Just use a whole dollar amount. The budget, the first column here is your budget column. Now there's no requirement to submit a proposed budget to the BSCC, but it is best practice to establish a budget before your project is implemented. So you'll want to put that information here. These line item categories are the standard categories that the BSCC uses. They may not all be relevant to your program, and that's fine. If you are not going to use them, just put 0. So say, for example, for salaries and benefits, here in this example, the advanced amount award was $100,000. So we'll say that $50,000 was going to be spent on salaries and benefits, and the other $50,000 was going to be spent on services and supplies, just to keep it nice and clean. We'll just look at 2 of the columns here. So this is what you're budgeting. And then at the end, you'll fill out the second column. And this is expenditures for the reporting period. And in this case, the reporting period is the entire grant period. So you will put in the actual amounts here. So say when all is said and done, you ended up spending $62,000 on salaries and benefits, and you'll see here that this balance column automatically calculates. And then this here, you ended up spending $38,000. And then what you should see here is this here, this bottom total here should have a dash in it at the end if you spent all of your funds. It doesn't mean that you have to have spent them the same way you had planned on spending them, but that you expended all of your funds. And again, ideally, we want you to spend all of your funds. You scroll down, beginning on line 33. This is where you will provide a description of your expenditures. And so for each line item where funds were used, you'll want to provide a brief yet detailed description. So you can see here that it is filled in the $62,000 that you actually spent. And then here you want to describe that, how that was spent. So you may have used a 0.5 FTE for one individual, and you'll want to break that down. X amount was spent on salary, X amount was spent on the benefits. If you need more space in any of these, you do have the flexibility to adjust the size. So don't feel like you're limited just by this, this little space here. If you want, there is comments here. You can provide additional information. This field is not required. but it is here just if there's other information that you want to include. Once you have filled that out, you'll then fill out this here for the information for the person that is filling out the report. So their name and title, phone number, email, and date. Just that way, again, if we have any questions, we can reach out and talk to the individual that completed this. And usually if we have questions, it's usually related to sort of the details and description, and that we need additional information about, about how the funds were spent, or more breakdown. So you put in this information for the person that prepared the report, and then the authorized financial officer will fill in their information. The authorized financial officer cannot be the same individual who prepared the report. So it needs to, this report, this information needs to be verified by two separate individuals. So the authorized financial officer will put their name, title, phone number, and date, and then they will need to check. It will be unchecked when you receive it, but they will need to check the certified box. And then you can ignore this submit button here. You won't be submitting this through the submit button. So once you have completed all of this, you will just save it and attach it here to this report. And then also somebody had said, well, what if we run, what's the character limit? If you run out of space and you end up doing, a Word document with additional information, you can also attach that here. And we love to see other things too. Like if you, for example, maybe you have a flyer or a brochure, if maybe there was some sort of group meeting and you have photos and you want to share with us, please do. We love seeing all of that information. So you can add more here, but you are required, one thing you have to include is this expenditure report. It will not allow you to submit without this attached. Without the Excel sheet attached. So you must attach that Excel sheet before you hit submit. There is also the option to get a copy of your responses. I definitely encourage you to do that, just so you have a record of your responses. And if you do that, it'll just ask for the email address that you want those sent to. And once you have all of that filled in, click submit. And you will be finished. Any questions on the expenditure report?
Just had a thing of clarification. The expenditure report is going to be an Excel file, correct?
Yes.
So the link that we provided for them for the template is a PDF. Are we going to be able to do that in Excel, or should they just use the PDF as a template?
Oh, is it a PDF? I'll get that changed so that it's an Excel file, so that you'll be able to actually manipulate the cells in there. Sorry about that. But yeah, I'll update that. And then, it will take us some time to get these customized, because again, we're customizing 390. Well, Eric is customizing 394 of these, the lucky dog. So it will take a while to get all of these out to you, but we will be, as we get them prepared, we will be sending them out. So, if you don't see it for, if August rolls around and you haven't seen it yet, don't be surprised. If it gets to be August 2025, you definitely should have it by then. So if you haven't, if it's getting close to the final report due date and you don't have it, please make sure to reach out to us so that we can make sure you get that. And along the same line, while I'm thinking of it, make sure that you keep your contact records up to date, so that if the person that's listed on our contact list now leaves, we're not going to know about it unless you tell us. And so send us that, send us any updates to the contact list so that we make sure that you're getting all of the necessary information when we do things like mail out the customized expenditure report. Other questions on the expenditure report?
Yes. Will you have a separate tab for modifications should we need to reallocate our programs?
Because you're only submitting this at the end, you won't, if you do any modifications you do will be done internally. So because we aren't asking you to submit your budget for prior approval. If you make modifications, we aren't going to be asking you to submit anything to get those modifications approved. So all of that will be done internally at your end. And then at the end, you will just report that. And it may be that if you make a major modification, your budget may end up not looking anything like your expenditure report. And that may be a circumstance where this comment box would be appropriate for you to describe, we had to make this dramatic shift in what we were going to spend our funds on because of blah, 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 blah. So. Other questions?
Since we received the funds in advance of our expenditures, are we required to earn interest on the grant funds allocated?
You're not required to put them in an interest-bearing account. You can if you want. If you do put them in an interest-bearing account, any interest earned must also be added to this budget report and must be spent on officer wellness. If you do not spend that interest on officer wellness, then that interest must go back to the state as well. Did I miss anything on that, Tanya?
No, you did a great job. The only other thing is, of course, we would just recommend those agencies that are putting it in an interest-bearing account is just to ensure that you're not holding the funds, that you're utilizing them as quickly as possible and not just trying to earn interest, although I don't think anybody is earning a lot of interest right now, but just making sure that you are using those funds as timely as possible and not holding them to earn interest.
There we go. I knew I was forgetting something. Thank you, Tanya.
In our agency, professional services would be procured using a contract. What is the difference between professional services and NGO subcontractors?
Tanya, do you want to?
The NGO subcontractors, those are non-governmental organizations. So that would be like your nonprofit organizations that you would be potentially contracting to. Professional services could be, for the purpose of this grant, professional services would be like your the services for like your counselors and some of the law enforcement professionals that you might be bringing in to provide services for your officers. And I get that those are probably going to be non-governmental organizations, but really NGOs, that the intent, I think, of that particular line item is mostly nonprofit organizations.
Thank you, Tanya. Other questions?
I got one more here. Can the authorized officials be anyone, or does it have to be one of the contacts we emailed the BSCC when we received the grant?
It shouldn't be anyone. You don't want some, hey, you happen to be walking by, can you come and sign this for me? But it should be somebody that is involved in the, the accounting process, but it doesn't have to be one of the contacts listed. Other
And
questions?
I believe that's all the questions we have for this particular section.
Okay, just any other questions that have come in that I can address that we haven't hit on? Let's see.
Yeah, let me look through here.
Not a
We have a lot
problem.
of questions. I'm trying to pick out, see if there's any ones that are standing out.
Let's see, let's see, I will confirm again, the annual reports are due 12/1/2023, 12/1/2024. Since we are getting close to noon, what I will do is I'll probably schedule another like 1-hour webinar for the annual report, probably about a month from now. I'll try to give you sufficient notification so that you're able to attend. But yeah, those two are due 12/1/2023, 12/1/2024. The final impact report and expenditure report is due 12/1/2025. I didn't give a specific date for when you'll be receiving the customized report, expenditure report. We'll be sending those out basically as we get them ready. So it may be, may receive it next week. It may be, 3 or 4 months from now, because we do have to create almost 400 of those. So that will take some time for us.
I got one here for you. Is grant administration a covered expense?
Tanya?
Sorry, I wasn't clicking off of mute. This grant does not allow for administrative expenses. There are some, I think, unique circumstances that possibly might allow, as far as like your attendance at this webinar. Those are things that typically the agency would just absorb those costs. But as far as administration, if you have a staff member that's maybe coordinating or implementing the officer wellness program or a peer support unit, that is allowable. That individual that is coordinating services that can provide a direct benefit to the officers. So in that way, it's allowable, but administrative cost, again, to maybe like attend this meeting or fill out the annual reports is something that is typically expected to be handled by the agency outside of the specific grant funds that were allocated.
Great, thank you, Tanya.
Welcome.
I see we have a quick question here in terms of reporting overtime. Overtime would be reported within the salaries and benefits line item.
So something that's come up a couple of times, people are questioning how do you navigate sworn versus professional members of the police departments. Can you touch a little bit on that? Because we're having a couple of different questions regarding that.
Tanya?
Jason, do you want me to? Okay, absolutely. So these grants, the grant funds were allocated directly to the agencies to target those staff members that meet the definition of Penal Code 830.1. As far as other professional staff, I have seen some of the comments in the chats. For example, if you're going to implement a gym, we're not saying that gym cannot be accessible to other staff besides those that meet the qualifications for Penal Code 830.1. But as long as you're establishing that gym to meet the needs of those officers, it is allowable to let others like dispatchers and other professional staff or other staff members utilize that space. But just making sure that the main intent when you do purchase that equipment, for example, that it is targeted for those peace officers. Another thing that if I can just hit on actually that ties to that. So when we say that these funds, that the intent is that the direct impact or the direct benefit of these funds goes to peace officers. But it's not to say if you have a member of your peer support team or your officer wellness team and they want to attend training, we've had some questions about, well, we can't send somebody that's not a peace officer, and that is not what we're trying to say either. Anybody that's on your peer support team or your officer wellness team that wants to get training that then is coming back to provide those direct services to your peace officers that meet the 830.1 definition, that is absolutely acceptable. So it's really about thinking about the direct impact going to the peace officers. So hopefully that that helps some, and not excluding those members of your team that might not be sworn, because we definitely want them to have training, because again, they do provide the direct services to the officers when they do return, and then can also share their learning from that training with other members of the team, and kind of keep some of the succession planning going.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. And sort of along those same lines, another example would be as if you are bringing somebody into your agency to do a training for those peace officers. It's directed at them, but that doesn't mean that those non-sworn officers couldn't attend that training as well. If they're, if it's bringing them in, to your agency to do this training. Definitely maximize, the benefit of that individual that's coming in. It should be directed towards the sworn officers, but that doesn't mean that non-sworn staff would be forbidden from attending. So keep those.
Yeah, that's correct. As long as they're not, like if Stacy was explaining, if you bring them in and they're charging you a set rate to come, and the target audience is those officers, and they're not going to charge additional fees for those other non-sworn staff, then it's absolutely acceptable to broaden those participants.
Okay, so we are coming up on 12 o'clock here, and I know you guys are very busy. I do appreciate all of your guys' time, all of your questions. As I said at the beginning, if we didn't get to your question today, we'll be doing an FAQ of all of the questions that came in, and we'll put that out on the website probably in about a week or so. So check back for that. And again, if you have any questions anytime between now and the end of the grant, reach out to us. That officer wellness email box is a great way to get a hold of us. And, we'll kind of triage it, and, depending on what the question is, we'll triage it and get it to the right person to make sure that they are able to answer that question, either sending you an email or reaching out to you over the phone and having a conversation. This recording will be posted on the Officer Wellness website. Give our IT a few days to get it processed and uploaded, but this will be available. And if there's anything else we can do, please let us know. Mike, I just see a question pop in for you. What is the deadline for this round of power applications? If you're still on. Oh, you might have had to have leave. Check on the website. It does have the deadlines on there, Matt. So you can check on those. But yeah, that's a great, that power program is a great way to sort of integrate those funds with these funds if you're available. So other than that, have a wonderful day, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And please feel free to reach out to us if there's anything we can do to assist you. Have a good day.
Thank you. And for those that want to hold on, I just looked up the deadlines for the power program. So the second round is concluding in just a couple days. It's April 1st to April 30th is round 2. And if you're interested then in round 3, it's July 1st to July 31st. And then round 4 will be October 1st through October 31st.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tanya. We appreciate that.
You're welcome.